Hello and welcome back to Football Discovery. Over the next few podcasts, we chronicle the football life of Brian McCarthy, Ireland's first ever technical analyst. In part 1, we look at the early years where Brian's insatiable passion for the game is forged. They say judge a man by the company he keeps. Chris Hughton, Alan Kelly, Damien Duff. Not so bad then. Enjoy! So Brian, firstly, welcome to footballdiscovery.com. Thanks very much for giving us your time. One thing that strikes me with your background is all the different stadiums you've been to in the world. But it all would have started, first memories Windsor Park, I suppose. Is that fair to say?
First memories actually in the National Stadium in Lusaka, believe it or not. Back on my father's shoulders watching the Zambian national team play. No memories of the game, but lots. We were in a very different type of spectator atmosphere. But that was the first time I was at a match. And then Windsor Park was probably the next memory in terms of being at a ground would have been to see Glentoran. I think probably first in the European Cup against Benfica, with Eusebio and Colun and Torres and a lot of the great Benfica team of the 60s playing. Glentoran drew 1-1 and 0-0 away and went out on away goals. So I was saying too that was the year that United beat Benfica in the European Cup final in Wembley. So, but I was at that match. No memories of the match, but 50,000 people jam-packed into the Oval grounds in Belfast, and just the excitement of that day alone. And then going to see George Best playing for Northern Ireland in Windsor Park. Obviously, they were the highlights. Early days. The crowds going to them. It's funny, I was just watching the memory of the 66 Ibrox disaster when all the spectators were killed. But in fact, there was a bridge going into Belfast, into Windsor Park over the train tracks, which was nearly a carbon copy of that bridge going out, and thousands used to go into that one little entrance and exit, and how there was, because in those days Northern Ireland, nowadays I think there's about 18,000 capacity or thereabouts.
Since they've done it up there recently.
Yeah. But back then it was 40,000 plus jam-packed into Windsor Park and absolutely full to the rafters whenever Best was playing. So yeah, seeing him play, because prior to that football wasn't part of my life at all. I was growing up in Africa for 10 years and we were always swimming for the school, hunting, running, bows and arrows, all that type of stuff, Rio Savannah, outdoor life. So football was the last. We never didn't play any football at all. And then those memories moving to Belfast, losing about 20 degrees in the process on board, and ending up then going to the matches at Windsor Park. And look, what really excited, 66 World Cup, I would have watched that on television in Belfast. Obviously England won it. So they were starting to, I heard the names of Pele and Eusebio. Then we saw them in the 66 World Cup. Bear in mind I'm only about 10 years of age at this stage, you know. And then started to get a little bit of a feel for the game, and really was just going to see George Best and see him perform, nearly miracles for Northern Ireland. Some days, no matter what he did in the match, no matter what the scoreline was in the game, George Best always did something, and everybody stood to attention when George Best got the ball, and he dismantled some of the best defenders in the world. He dismantled the England team, most of whom had played in the '66 World Cup final, and then of course that lit the fuse, and straight home to Finnehy in Belfast, got the ball out and on my own, non-stop against the wall, trying tricks, because as I said to you, that it wasn't the age of YouTube, it wasn't the age of multimedia, it wasn't the age of mass video availability. Match today, once a week, they might show them, and the highlights of the international game, the home internationals they called them in those days. And then you simply had to try and memorize in your head what exactly he did. Then no coaches, by the way. You then had to try and see, could you replicate that? He was kind of living the dream, trying to be George Best. And that was more about really, could you learn the little things that made him so exciting? What made him stand out? Why did everyone go to see George Best? Why did everyone stand to attention when George got the ball? Why was he in the papers every single week? Well, he was in for different reasons, but mainly he was in there for the reasons of his brilliance. Funny enough, looking at the Wayne Rooney's recent goal scoring nearing the 250 mark, George Best 179 goals, and he basically was retired by 26 for a winger. So I mean that's a staggering amount of goals for a player. So that really, and then from Windsor Park, as you mentioned about other grounds, it wasn't much the ground. The ground wasn't the important thing. It was the player. The players brought you to the ground, and I think that's possibly something that's lost nowadays. People go to see the ground now, and if there's a decent match, well,
it's kind of a match day experience now, as opposed to I'm going to see George Best. Or
it's amazing to be in some of the English Premier League grounds. I was there lately, a couple of them there, and people spend half the time inside the bookies. You know, you wonder where second half starts and the place is still empty 10 minutes into the second half. What's going on?
And that has been in the media a lot recently, this kind of instant gratification type direction that the world is going, of, I'm going to check Facebook, what's on Facebook, or the attention span of your next generation, let's call it that, is getting smaller and smaller. So the likelihood of kids doing what you described, going from a terrace, which probably doesn't exist now, to the playground or the yard or whatever, and executing the skills they've seen is probably lost in a generation. How do we get that back, do you think, or emulate that in some way, shape or form?
I think there's an innocence that's been lost. I mean, I was lucky to grow up in that innocent age. I mean, I hear the great David Bowie talking about the onset of the internet back in '99. Recently said it's going to have a huge effect for good and bad for society. No one is going to know the effects. And really, I think that innocence where, less is more. That's basically where it's difficult for young parents, young families, young kids, starting in the modern generation, given the avalanche of technology and various things that are there that just weren't available when we were growing up. And I often said to my wife, that we were lucky we grew up in the times we grew up in. And I'm sure a lot of guys who are finished their careers will say, yeah, we were lucky. We grew up in, I was talking to Robbie Keane and Damien Duff and Richard Dunn and John O'Shea one night, just talking about their early experiences, young players going over at 15, 16, 17, and they said they had to do all the menial jobs. They had to sweep the dressing rooms. They had to, whatever they were asked to do. He said you had to clean the boots, it was part of your job as a scholar. And they had an innocence in their formative years, even as a young club player. So they weren't made to feel extra special. They had to earn the corn, as we would say here. Certainly from my point of view, going back to your question about where do we get that back, I mean, look, what makes football such a great game, it's not the huge staggering. I mean, so many people are awash with all this 600,000 for Tebas, these huge Chinese figures. I'm not interested. What I'm interested in is, that one young kid who takes my eye and lights the fire when you watch a game where no one is at. And it's amazing. It's still the beauty of the game. You watch a game, the 60,000 there watching a GA game down the road, but you see a little kid there on his own in a game there doing something of wonder, and there's nobody there to watch it, applaud it, admire it, but you're still saying that's what it's about, that little touch of creativity. I think with George Best, what people miss out with George Best is that what he does, he lit the fire of imagination, and that's what he did for me. And I don't think, and I've had this discussion with Port Nicholson, our mutual friend there, and Port's great admirer, Bobby Charlton, and so am I. But George Best brought millions more people to the game than Bobby Charlton, in terms of the way he for young kids growing up. I'm sure Ronaldo does the same thing nowadays. He does, of course, and Messi, and that's the beauty of both of those. And I think we had this discussion as well, that if you look at the mass availability of Messi moments, it's too much. It's unfair on Messi. And every Messi moment has to be followed by an even better Messi moment. And people can go back and wind back and get all these platforms, and at a touch of a button they can dissect. You couldn't dissect George. You had to see George Best, and then you could talk to somebody else who saw George Best. If you didn't see George Best, there's no point talking to you, because you don't know what you're talking about. And then if we had the same feeling,
Did it connect, I suppose, creativity and imagination then, because you had to reenact it in your own mind? Do you know what I mean? So now you weren't just working on your game technically. There was that mental preparation almost, because you couldn't go onto YouTube and look at it, like you said.
I think the football is excitement. I mean, and I think that we've sometimes got away from that. You get pundits cross-examining a game and telling you what you should have seen.
Mm-hmm.
Hang on a second. Football is about, if I can't see excitement. My father was he's still alive, thanks to God, and he's in great form. He had a great comment. He said, you go to matches of any sport to watch players do what you can't do. And I think that's a good way of putting it, So I couldn't do what George Best do, but I was going home to try and seek. The other thing was, I could see the effect he had on people. I could see that people were going to games with this unbelievable buzz, and I had an unbelievable buzz going to matches, and it would last for days or weeks afterwards. I wasn't in a team. I didn't have a coach. I had none of the paraphernalia that surrounds most of the players now. No agent. I wasn't being scouted by anybody. I wasn't going for trials for anybody. I didn't have parents hankering about looking to see where they can get me to this club. So I was completely, and like a lot of the guys, the boys at that time, we were so blessed to grow up then, because we really that's why we get that love of the game. I wasn't playing the game to try and get a trial for somebody or broach a career. My parents were always big in education. Of course, I had a dream like any young boy would be. I'd love to be George Best and play for Manchester United. And I'm sure, and I hope that young boys and girls have that dream still. And I think that's what's lost with all the hype that goes on the game, the multi media approaches that dominate football between TV and the internet and newspapers. So I think that's where we need to get back. To go back to your question, okay, is how do we bring that back? And that's just me, but there was millions of boys like me around the world, and girls, who have that. And I don't have to go and watch games every week. I used to do it for a living, but I still will watch a game that I think I might see something different, and I still watch. But more importantly, watch a player. And I think what has happened from the generations of the 40s, 50s, 60s. I remember seeing Puskas on a black and white going back from the 5 in a row Real Madrid, and I could not believe the power he was generating with his foot there. This is a guy that's in it's historical footage, and you're saying that is incredible. Some of the drag backs that used to, and Garincha, for example, and that's long before the 70 World Cup team. So it's Damien Duff. Damien was apparently talking to one of our own staff in the international team, talk about young players, and he said he's talking to 18-year-old lads, good lads apparently of quality, and mentioned about Paul Gascoigne. They didn't know who Paul Gascoigne was. So we knew. I would have known even my football history going way back, because I had that love of the game, and I don't think that love of the game is there for a lot of them. And the parents, are well-meaning, want to do the best for the boys. The best thing you can do for your boys is let them enjoy the game and love it. Yeah. And I've come across so many boys that have been, fantastic young 16, 17-year-olds, and it hasn't worked out.
It's interesting that you make that point when you bring up Puskás, actually, because I read somewhere recently that when he won, I think was it the Ballon d'Or, when he was with Real Madrid or the equivalent at the time, that his speech was a short one. I'd like to thank my father for everything he didn't teach me, which I think was at the time picked up as almost being a criticism of his father, but seemingly he was talking about exactly what you're talking about, that lack of interference. It's, let me play the game. And that's probably crucially your point there, in terms of what we need to do is let kids play and try and get rid of the saturation maybe that's there. I want to take you away at the moment from Windsor Park to where you're, I suppose, peeking through shoulders and hopping on shoulders to get a glimpse of the game. You go from a development officer's role in the FAI, which we'll speak about a little bit later, and you get a promotion at the time that Brian Kerr becomes international manager. Speak to us about how that comes about.
Well, I suppose there's a kind of a long lead into that. I suppose the first thing is that growing up as a young player, before I met Brian, I was aware when I was playing for UCC at first team level, Kinsale, which is my old club there, we had a great team for many years, and then on to play for Listowel Celtic, Three Dynamos, St Brendan's Park, Calnafercy. I was aware that through all those times, I had one coach who gave me one little piece of advice, but I realised, and I especially realised when I went to a coaching course with the going back in the 1980s, the first coaching course here, one with an English FA. There was a couple of guys came over here and ran a little kind of a course, and I realised then that we were never given any education on the game whatsoever. And while a lot of the generation I grew up in had that individual skill set, we didn't have that knowledge of the game. So when I realised, look, I have got to become a coach, because I became a teacher, I qualified at UCC, and I said, look, I want to become a coach because I want to teach players what I didn't know. Now, what I'd like to do is have the skill set that I would have had, and a lot of generation I grew up with had that individual skill set. Let's go back to your earlier question, but then have that wider knowledge of the game that really makes a difference in terms of your fundamentals. So from that moment on, I then went on a kind of a hell-bent, odyssey of coach education all the way through. And you have to remember, we're talking about the FEA now with all the coach education courses and ladders and this course and that course. There was nothing happening. It was only really the late 80s, 90s that there was some measure of development there, but they were sporadic courses. The great Noel Wright had to go to England to do his full badge as a Noel King. That was going back, and that was a very, very rare to even be allowed to do that there. So, Welsh FA, the mass of courses that are available around the world weren't available. Anyway, that leads me to the fact that I decided, and luckily my wife was very good to indulge me in that, anything I could go to, any seminar. I know Porg Nicholson we both joined AFCAT. I didn't know Porg. Porg used to go to England regularly across to the AFCAT coaching conferences. At a time, there was very few Irish guys were.
David Platt, was it?
It was an association at a magazine. You got your gear. You paid every year into it. You got your coaching gear as well, and they held big conferences there with leading coach Don Howe. People like that would actually spearhead these conferences. There be one or 2 day affairs held in Birmingham, London. Yeah. Porg used to go to them. Yeah. So really, then I decided I'd start doing some. I think it was level 1 courses. There was a level 1. It was Terry Delaney who became Cork's Hibernian, was Cork's Celtic manager way back in the early 90s. Did a course there. Did a level 1, including Liam McMahon. Liam would have been the legendary Cove Ramblers manager. Won 10 months senior league titles in a row. Brought them into the League of Ireland. A fantastic team. What a team! I mean, and went into the League of Ireland time at the wrong time because they had such a brilliant team. Paddy Short and Frank O'Neill and all these guys were playing. I played against them as a young student at UCC. Absolute lesson. It's like playing against Barcelona at that time of the times, because they were all ex-League of Ireland, but they were a very tight group. But Liam was one of the coaches on that, and by the end of that, I think I played right back throughout the whole little 5-a-side, 7-a-side little course there. And I realised actually after that you could actually, with coaching, you could play anywhere. Actually, I was playing right winger, but I could have played right back. Was even better, because first of all, there weren't really good left wingers, and you could actually make the pitch if you had pace. But these were all things I even just picked up as a 28-year-old. And from then I got onto other courses, and eventually did the old B license under Morris Price, Jimmy McDermott, up in the AUL, and then eventually led me on to the A license in King's Hospital with Morris and Jimmy. And Morris was unbelievable. I mean, I had to do the license twice. I failed the license the first time. It was only about 3 out of 20 passed. They were the pass rates. And you had to really, and I didn't deserve it first time round, but the course was fantastic the second time round, even better. And the reason that was important is that spirit. This is how the Brian Kerr connection comes along. The knowledge I got from that, because you then had to go away for a year and then come back for your assessment, and you were told in no uncertain terms you better be working on all these sessions, and all the sessions were outdoor based. Okay, we went from 8 in the morning to 7 o'clock at night, and then we had some theory stuff afterwards. But we did everything from 3-5-2s to 4-3-3s to 4-1-4-1, you name it. Shadow play, zonal marking, creative attacking techniques, third man runs, what we see Liverpool do all the time, was being lauded. Morris was doing that, coaching that back in the 90s. An unbelievable course with an unbelievable tutor, Morris Price. Okay, and lucky I was actually injured for the second course, because in those days you had to act as a participant. I had actually done the B licence, and Morris and Jimmy were in charge of the under-16 Irish team. And unknown to me, for the week of the assessments, we had Robbie Keane's team that won the European title. We didn't know anything about them, except they were so good we couldn't coach them hardly, and we were dreading the assessments because they were already doing what we were supposed to try and get them to do, and realised afterwards that that's what a stellar group of players they were. So that led me on to the fact that when we did the licence in King's Hospital, a year later I was to do the final assessment, and then I decided I'd been coaching teams left, right, and centre down here, and in the school, in the intermediate school, Killorglin, and I decided that I would take a team in Tralee, and there was a team called Tralee then, it was under 16s, okay, who I'd been told by everyone had been in the semi-finals of the National Cup at 12-13. Some very good players, but apparently I was told, waste of time, won't play if you won't train, won't do anything. Well, I said, I'll take them for 3 months. I had been playing for Dynamos, I managed Dynamos, player and managed one of the leagues and so on for them. And I took them there for that year, and I said once a week for 2.5 hours, and after about 3 weeks the players all came to me and said, can we have that twice a week? It was there really first. Now, Dave Staunton had done very good work when Dave was an A licensed coach with myself from Kerry. So it meant that I then introduced these boys to video analysis, and probably the first group of players, underage players, maybe in the country, or if not, very close to it, down the Brandon Hotel, hiring the hotel myself, hiring the room, getting a projector, putting it on the VHS Ajax tapes, only tapes you can get of Van Gaal's team, of that the Davids and that generation. Slowing it down, trying to show them little things, trying to educate them, bought skipping ropes, bought all kinds of equipment myself, bought their kit for the whole year, okay? Gave them a measure of training. There were some outstanding players. Get at the back to Morris Raleigh, the captain, without a doubt, miles better than most of the players who've gone to England. I'm telling you now, that guy would have been another Richard Dunn. He's that good a player. What a defender. We're talking about John Stones there. There's no way that something Morris Raleigh would make those mistakes. And he paced the burn, and he had an unbelievable will to win. And there was loads of players in that team, from Jared Brown to Niall Howard to Patrick McCannon to Michael Hogan, Derek O'Brien, who went on to play for Galway and so on there. Another player, a George Best type player, right? But again, a player who had to come into my new coaching philosophy there and become the player that he never was before that. And he became the player that he always threatened to be, but in a coaching and discipline environment. So that group of players went on to win the FA Youth Cup. Should have won the Munster Youth Cup, beaten by Wilton semi-final in extra time. Colin Healy's team. O'Brien wiped the floor with Healy in the second half. Healy dominated the first half, to be fair. But that was the measure of that team. And an outstanding group of players. And the reason that is all leads to Brian Kerr is that I rang Brian Kerr after the semi-final, having beaten Limerick in the semi-final, beat Drogheda with 6 first-team players up in Drogheda in front of 3,000 people there. And I rang Brian and said, what's going on? I didn't know. I said, you're the under-18 international manager. I have an unbelievable group of players down here. No one is paying the slightest bit of attention. Okay? Niall Howard had played for Ireland a number of times, played in Robbie Keane's team as goalkeeper. Jared Brown had a couple of caps. But I had 5 or 6 guys. I mean, if I was scouting then, I'd have been ringing all the clubs in England. I'd have 5 or 6 guys to bring over straight away. And there were other players in Kerry as well at that time. Clarny Celtic had some very good players that year as well. And so did Massive had some very good players at that stage. But the point is, I had a 2-hour rant with Brian on the phone long before I became a regional development officer. I was still teaching full-time in the intermediate school, Killorglin, by the way, an unbelievable school. Had a huge influence on my career. And Joe Dwyer, who passed away last year, the principal, was one of the last of a kind. I'm actually working for a similar kind of guy, Dr. Mulford in Unison College, a real visionary, and a guy who had his own idea how things education should be done. Now they have to go to all these meetings. It's got to be all, synergized. But this was when a guy could have his own vision of his own school and actually lead the way himself. And he was. So that led me to Brian Kerr. So Brian actually stayed on the phone, and of course, typical with Brian, he gave it back to me in spades as well. So we had this ongoing argument between a Kerry accent and a Dublin accent there. The thing was, he never held it. He actually said afterwards that it was one of the things that always stood out with him. That first phone call, he never forgot it. He said the passion and the energy and the knowledge. Now, I had the knowledge now, you see, that's the whole thing, Conor, okay? But I had the knowledge not from doing the course, by doing hundreds of sessions, okay? By demanding more of myself and the players all the time, and by putting relentless hours in after a day's work. So I'm driving out to Clorgan half 7 in the morning to teach in a very high power school which expects high results, and then to come back and then to coach every single afternoon, all to get my A license. I took that team to get my A license. Right? I was using them. They thought they were using me. No, I was using them. Okay, so I was determined to get my A license my second time round, and there was no repeats in those days. There was no ringing anybody to say, well, I should have got my course, and no, that didn't happen. And I just took it on the chin. So Brian took it on the chin as well, and from that, later on, whenever the regional development office, the 4 jobs were actually advertised, only 4, one per province. When it came out in the Star, everyone said you should go for that job. I'd won the FA Cup there, been building a very good new Kingdom Boys. I started Kingdom Boys as well. Well, they actually hadn't started at that stage. Still involved with Dynamos. And then went for the job. Bernard, Brian and Jimmy McDermott were on the panel. I think they did a kind of travelling roadshow around all the country doing all these interviews. Did the interview, thought nothing more of it. Well, something comes of it. Because there were no jobs before that. The FA didn't have anything. There was just a few people working around Merrion Square. Really, yeah. Morris and Jimmy trying to do the best they possibly could. With Larry and a couple of lads out in Christie, and that was the sum total of the FEI. Now it's like a big company, so anyway, Brian rang me and said, it's like a letter from Bernard actually said, we'd like to offer you the job. So I rang them back and said, on one condition, I can carry on teaching full time, because it was a 2-year. I'm not going to give up a great job here, pencil job here, for a 2-year thing that might just fall through the roof. Because there's no proof the FEI could keep anything going at that stage. So took on the job, and Brian was agreeable to that. So I was working full-time teaching and part-time RDO, which is 26 hours a day, I think that is. And then Brian quickly realised, in those days the regional development officer meetings were held once a month. I think it was in the Holiday Inn, or it was a Holiday Inn in those days, right in the middle of the roundabout in Dublin Airport. And they were unbelievable meetings. They'd start at 9 o'clock or 8:30 sometimes, and they might finish at 8 o'clock that night. And there was just the small group of 10 of us starting off: Trevor and Niall and Warwick and Steve and Declan and Noel, and Paul Smith and leaving out there.
Paul Sheridan.
Paul wasn't on the original group. That was the first group. But the dynamic in the room was just unbelievable. Just the discussions. We brought all kinds of stakeholders in and conferred and deferred to just about everybody in the country. But the big thing about that, Brian Kerr said to all of us, you've all got your jobs here on one thing. You were all achieving in your areas. You've all been either winning national cups, producing players, especially, was more important, and they're highly successful in your area. You've been movers and shakers in your region, and that's why you got the job. Right now, coincidentally, most of us had done our B&A licenses, so we were all actually, we didn't have to get qualified in the FEA, we already had it, but we were out on the ground doing all those things, and in schools, because I was in schools and I working with the school team. I was doing football in the schools, which I really was shame people like Mike Frank Russell and all those kind of guys. I was trying to get them on board, and David of Football and Billy Sullivan, and there's a load of guys there, and I was trying my best to try and get them. But it was difficult, obviously, because G and Kerry had such a huge sway. But I understood that. I always realised that was the battle. I had to become the best coach in Kerry to try and get those boys from being GA orientated to, that you have a chance in football and in soccer, as they would call it here. So Brian and I realised that. So we come back to the meetings in the Holiday Inn. Those meetings were so dynamic, and Brian always encouraged disagreement. If you didn't disagree, if you had something to say, if you didn't believe his vision, he encouraged it all the way, and it led to some fantastic discussions. And if you're ever going to grow a successful team, organisation, if you don't encourage debate, disagreement for the right reasons on logical grounds, okay, and then as a good leader, he's able to mould that, use all those, and he did that. And you can see why he was so successful with teams, because he could marry all those influences and all those contrasting views into one symbiotic whole. So from that period with Brian and Noel, who was such a huge part of our lives at that stage, that whole era with Brian. So Brian realised, I went on a couple of trips to Frankfurt, which he would allow me to go to the UEFA coach and trainers one. Andy Roxburgh ran it for a few days. I took detailed notes, sent them back. Went to Huddersfield Town. We had a big link with Huddersfield Town, Kingdom Boys. Steve Bruce was there at the time, Lou McCarthy, John Dean. We became great friends with them. We went over to the Yorkshire Cup a number of times with Kingdom Boys teams. We went over to other Finland and Holland and Paris as well. from that there, and I give detailed reports. Then Brian let me go to the international coaching course in Zeist for 10 days, and that was the time the football conditioning was coming out, and who's the great guru of football conditioning from Holland.
Van Heen,
Raymond Verheyen, and he was on it. So yeah. This is long before the 2002 World Cup, even in Korea. Yeah. So I learned the huge report of all that back to the. So I was doing the minutes, and I was doing a lot of stuff because I have a background in computers with my master's degree there, and I was head of computer science in the school and built all the computer labs. So that's going back at a time long before the generations. The point is that Brian realised that I had a lot of tech skills, and he always had it in his mind, obviously, as he was a highly successful international manager underage. I'm sure he always had it in his mind that he wanted to become the international manager. And from that time, he said to me, after the 2 years, he said, I'd like to get you into the, would you go full time? And I said, look, I can take a 5-year career break, but I need to know that I can really advance in this association. And in those days, you could advance through your skill set and through your knowledge and through your background and through what you've done. I mean, you look at Brian Kerr's career and know you go just reference back to what they've done, and go to the players who played for them and ask the players who played for them what they thought of them, and then look at those players' careers and see where they've gone. I think we made that point already, but with Jeff Hendrick, how important is the Irish team for Jeff Hendrick? It's got him a Premiership move to Burnley through Martin and Roy's experience, and Brian had that effect on so many players. I mean, who Brian didn't directly benefit, but their experience of playing for Brian had a big bearing on their future careers. So going back to Brian, so really that's the genesis of getting involved with the national team. And then Brian said, look, I want to get you involved. I'll get you this opportunity to become part. I'll give you more onerous work. I'll give you a more onerous role. And then when he went for the international job, obviously when Mick was very, very, very unfortunate. I met Mick a few times. Did exactly this with Mick. I interviewed with Mick myself. Great guy, and first man to bring performance analysis into the FEI. Persuaded them to buy the system for the 2002 World Cup. Brought a New Zealand guy and very nice guy, Ian Rogers, who was there on contract. And then Mick didn't get a chance to use it in the 2 games in the 2004 campaign, Switzerland and Russia. Lost 2 games. Came back a hero in August. If you remember that, in July. And then by October, people wanted his head. Anyway, that is the way football goes, and it meant that Brian was in with a chance of getting the job. We went to Abu Dhabi for an under-18 tournament. He brought me along for the very first time to say, look, I want this analysis thing to be. I had been in London for 3 days training, and then went to Abu Dhabi, and we put this to the test for the very first time with people like Stephen Kelly and Kevin Doyle. They were all in that squad. And we won the very first tournament. We were the first Irish under-18 to beat France in the tournament. Won the tournament in Abu Dhabi and had a few hiccups where we were there on the technology, but Brian didn't know. Computer melted down. I had to ring Adelaide for 7 hours overnight, no sleep for 48 hours to get the presentation the next day. Brian wasn't the wiser, as long as it was on cue. And from that, when we were in Abu Dhabi, he got us all together on the last night, Brian, myself, the physios and the doctor, and said he just got a phone call that he's got the international Irish job. And of course we had a great party. And then that was the start of that whole era.
I find it amusing at times. You've detailed very well there the massive amount of work that goes in behind the scenes, or the amount of preparation that was put in. Even if you reference your career or even Brian's career, and then you get to the level where you're a senior international management team, and I suppose the papers are writing that you're inexperienced. Do you know what I'm saying in terms of what's the best example? Like a Gareth Southgate will go literally off the pitch and into being Middlesbrough manager, and inexperience doesn't get thrown around, even though it's a completely new job. Whereas here you have, someone that's teaching themselves the game as a player, getting an education in teaching, which is obviously fundamental to the racket you're going to be involved in. upskilling in computers, and you've gone through that trial and error of coaching and all the time that takes. And yet at times you can be viewed because you don't have that professional player profile, if you like, as being inexperienced. But when you do start, because you're the first ever technical analyst to the senior men's international team, so it's not like you can ring the last guy for advice. How important was that background, that experience to you?
Well, I think the big thing, you touched on a few things there, Conor, and I've always been a big fan of European clubs in terms of the way they educate their players, and that school is a big part of their life. I've been across the clubs in England and the continent, and we're taking Australian, our own college boys, Newton College boys, to 32 boys to Spain and Portugal in April. We're going to Benfica, Valencia, Seville and Barcelona. We're going to be coached by all those coaches at those clubs. And because traditionally Australian boys would go to England, that's where they go. And I'm saying the experience you're going to get here, their post-education, you have the Real Madrid guys out there. I just love the way they handle and educate boys, because they all have backgrounds themselves in education. So my parents were hugely, we grew up in Belfast when Belfast was in bits, okay? We left Africa whenever it was blowing up as well, so I seem to be responsible for a lot of world problems.
You've moved to Australia, Brian. Should we take something?
I think the Australians should turn in my visa very quickly. But so yeah, and Belfast was just. Martin grew up. I went to see Martin. Martin was one of my favourite players. My favourite player after that time after George, but Martin was playing for Distillery, and I saw his very last game, unknown to my father, who thought I was somewhere else, because you couldn't tell him you were going to Windsor Park for the IFA Cup final between Derry City and Distillery, the only two nationalist teams in the north, in the home of the biggest loyalist team in the north. So, and there's me, a little fella there, in with the Distillery boys there, and Martin scored twice that day. It was his last game before going to Forest. But going back to your question about the education was the first. It's a big help to them. They'll admit that themselves. They've got something in their pocket there for future reference. And the Australian parents are very good that way too. Even a few of the boys I know from the A-League, parents do realise that football is a tenuous job. So going back to the question about the expertise and all. So you must remember, by the way, that, and I have to say this on behalf of all players that my generation, I was in Belfast, but there was fantastic players in Dublin and Liverpool and Manchester and you name it around the world at that time. There was no scouting system. There was no matter how we were all very good ball players. The decision making, we would never get into that because there was no coaching. So therefore, you could beat six and lose the next time round. But I keep saying to people, give me the guy who can beat six players, and then I'll work with him. No, we can't get the guys who can beat six players, and it's become a complete possession passing game. And yet we still turn on television on to watch the individual. But going back to the question there so education was a big part of it there. And in terms of, my parents pushed it all the time. You want to get out of Belfast. I was in the Christian Brothers in De La Salle. They were fantastic because they would have realised, you must remember, that people like John Hume and Bernard Devlin were the first people, say, from the Catholic side of Northern Ireland, who went to university in the late 50s, 60s. You couldn't go to Queen's, and that was the only university in Britain. So, coming from a national background, your educational opportunities were hugely minimised. So the Christian Brothers in Belfast were fantastic, and they really worked hard. They realised that Belfast at that stage was Beirut. Okay, you had no future there whatsoever. Your only future in Belfast was getting educated and getting out of Belfast. Sorry, Belfast, but that's the truth. And my father was along the same lines because it was a sectarian city. There was bombs every night, 3,500 people killed over a time frame. No place for young families. No place to bring up your kids. And we came from an idyllic lifestyle in Lusaka to this hellhole. But now I benefited because you learn other skills as you have to. And my parents were obviously very keen for us all to prize education highly, which we all did, and worked hard. So and they always had an ambition for us. And parents have to have an ambition for their kids. And there's so many you find so many boys now and girls now, and you find that the parents actually don't have any ambition for them. And I don't mean in a bad way, because there's the wrong type of ambition for the kid, the pressure ambition. But if you don't have any idea of what you'd like your son or daughter to do, or types of things you'd like them to do or aspire to, very, very, very soon they'll be the same way, and they'll have no time for school, no time for anything, and that's another discussion. So from that there, I developed this fantastic appetite for education. I still have it, okay, and so whatever it was, so I was always good. I was lucky. I was quite good at maths there, and that became a forte there. But other subjects too. So quite a wide variety of subjects. I taught quite a wide variety when I was not very well. The students will probably tell you, but anyway, I tried it. But it meant that I always had this voracious appetite to learn and to get better and develop. And that's what stood me in football. And it's the same as stood Brian McCarthy already, okay? Because really, where the professional player comes out of the game, he's played the game all his life. You know, he can strike a ball better than I can. Yeah, he can chip a ball better than I can. Yeah, he can dribble the ball better than I can. He can catch the ball better than I can. But you're not going to be on the pitch when you're a coach. You know, you'll be standing off the pitch. You won't be able. So you have no responsibility. No, you have to know the techniques of all that. But the important thing is that learning paradigm that we were lucky to be in meant that I did every kind of course. It was computers, football, sport. I had athletics coaching courses. I did the GA coaching course, level 1. Ned O'Sullivan. Mickey did a brilliant course here way back when I was in the school in Clorgan. I was never averse to learning other. Football was always number one, but I was never averse. I swam for the school. I was very swimming when I was a kid in Africa there. But nowadays you need to be about 7'3" to be a good swimmer. And ran. We did a running. Mind the Africans used to whip us there and anything over 300 meters, and still doing it. But having that's really from a lot of formative influences there. My parents, the schools, but then that's also something that has to seed. So that seed meant that I never looked upon myself as. I know I needed to do the coaching courses to get the real knowledge. Once I finished the A license, started work with teams. Realised that I had, because a lot of guys said to me, funny, one of the centre forward who scored in every single round of the FA 98 winning team, Paddy McCann, what a finisher. Goals he got. He got 9 goals that year, probably more, but he got 1 in every single round, which were all goal of the season contenders. I always remember we did a fantastic celebration afterwards, and he said, you're going to work a lot harder than this, he said. He just said, we had a few drinks, maybe I was just drink talking, but that's what he said. Funny, I didn't think much of it. And because I realised then that I had something, and then I worked with other teams, my own boys, Peter and Stephen, we started the Kingdom Boys, and very quickly we realised that although we started with nothing, no pitch, no gear, no money, nothing, with great people like Tony O'Neill, Chris Kearns and Gerard Mahoney and Stephen Hartson and people like that, and Redmond Powell, we quickly built up a little club there, and suddenly we were the best team. We whipped all the Limerick teams, with them all in all the competitions. Then we were producing international players every year. We were taking our boys up on bus trips to see our boys play for Ireland. This never happened in Kerry before. And I realised then that I could take players there and I could really transform them, and I could take teams and transform, and I knew the game, and that was down to all the people that I worked with. Morris had a huge part in that, Brian and Noel. And so I don't ever look at myself as being inferior to any international player about the knowledge of the game. And having worked with people like Giovanni Trapattoni, Martin, Roy, Steve, and of course Brian himself, I look at the game with far more forensic than most of the international players would even, because that's what I'm paid to do. But it's part of the learning curve and the skill set then that you talked about there. Those computer skills. I mean, computers going back I was learning languages that are now disused. You know, Pascal, Comel, you know, Quick Basic. I mean, Sensible Solution, 4th generation languages. Built our own systems. Commodore 64, Sinclair 81s. You know, into Amstrads. Then we did the first little Mac. Got a reconditioned one from Hollyhill in Cork, free of charge from Apple. Took the boys, took 10 students up. Such a big deal then to get a little reconditioned computer from Apple, the little box one, presented to us their photographs in the papers. That's the innocence that's gone. We all of us, the students and the teachers, we treat that little Apple there like gold dust, you know, and we were in awe of it. And that is where we need to get back to. There is such an abundance of so many materials, and knowledge has never been more available. Open University was another big learning curve that helped me as well, because I did information technology Open University diploma, which is online.